Hi.
Hi.
We're here with the first section, which is about what are habits in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so, first of all, we want to talk about why are spiritual habits necessary at all?
Yeah, what do they have to do with our lives?
Mm-hmm.
And so Paul said in Romans, I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I don't do, but I hate what I do. And so there's this conflict, this tension between the spirit and the flesh. And so spiritual habits help us overcome these things. So we have to know that when Adam and Eve were in the garden, they disobeyed God. They disobeyed the one thing that he told them not to do. It was rebellious. They wanted to be like God. And so they disobeyed. And what happened, the result of that, is that sin entered him, entered his descendants, and his descendants, his descendants, and his descendants. It's never stopped. So this is what some people call the original sin. This is sin that we need to get rid of in our life, and we cannot do that on our own. This sin that is part of our sin nature can only be redeemed by God. We can only get rid of this by becoming born again, by receiving a new nature, by receiving his nature. And so what's so interesting is that there's always been a way out, because what this sin does is creates a separation between us and God. So Jesus became that bridge that connects the divide between God and us.
Both God and man.
But yes.
Fully God, fully man.
Human. That's
The
right.
bridge.
Fully right. And he died on the cross and removed that gap. And what's interesting is that he has always been there for us. But, like Oz, Dorothy, she didn't know. She didn't know that 2 hours before in the movie, she could have gotten home.
Saved the whole movie.
Yeah. But so we can find God by accessing him, by becoming born again, and just seeking him and asking him to come into our hearts.
And let me point out that habits and spiritual disciplines, as they were called, which I don't like that word necessarily for it. It sounds like you're being rapped on the knuckles. Spiritual habits, it's like any other habits you have. They're part of what's called sanctification. They're part of the way that sanctification happens.
Right.
And so we'll get into that a little bit later. But right now we want to say how you grow spiritually through spiritual habits.
Yeah, this scripture is one of my favorites for this whole program. It says that his divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through the knowledge of him who called us by his glory and goodness, through which we have his precious promises. So it's seeking him. It's seeking the knowledge of him. So then it goes on to say, through his promises, we participate in his divine nature. So with all diligence.
Okay, here we go now. Yeah.
Here we go.
How do we participate?
With all diligence.
With all diligence.
We add to our faith.
Who adds? Who does?
We do.
We do.
With our diligence.
With diligence.
We add to our faith.
Goodness.
And then to that goodness, knowledge.
And then self-control.
And then perseverance.
Godliness.
Brotherly kindness.
And love.
And think of an inverted pyramid. So love is at the top. We're going to add to these things. We're going to add to these things. And love is at the top because it takes love to want to disciple others.
And why is it an inverted pyramid? Because it gets bigger
and bigger and bigger
and bigger.
Is
the largest
there.
piece.
Yeah. So the last part of 2 Peter 1:2-11 says, if you possess these things, they will keep you from being ineffective and fruitful. Unfruitful, thank you. And if you do these things, you will never stumble.
Never stumble,
He puts that as an if. We can choose.
If these things are incorporated in your life.
Right.
you will not stumble.
Right. If you pursue these things. Now, and we're going to talk about this later, how we put the effort in and God multiplies this through sanctification.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Very
yes,
good,
yes,
very
yes.
So let's talk a little bit about what habits are all about.
Mm-hmm.
What is a habit? This is just basic, very basic stuff. You may already know this, but I was enjoying thinking about it again because it's an amazing thing, because we're built to build habits.
Mm-hmm.
We're structured in that way. A habit is merely something that it's a behavior that's performed often enough with enough regularity that it becomes automatic.
Mm-hmm.
And the brain actually does this.
Mm-hmm.
It actually creates these channels, these connections. And why does it do that? It wants to save three things that are in short supply in our life. We'll all agree that motivation can be of short supply. We all understand that energy is in short supply. We run out.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's attention. Very short supply, especially these days.
Mm-hmm.
So the brain creates these channels and habits to make it easier.
Mm-hmm.
They've done studies so that when the habits are being performed, there's less energy going on in there. It takes less energy to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get into that later about breaking them, but anyway, that's it. You naturally form habits.
Mm-hmm. And like tying your shoe or driving a car, you don't think about it. You just do it.
You do not.
Right.
Yeah. So as we say here in the book, that it's the New Year's resolution problem. You know, the 88% of people who start New Year's resolutions and can't do them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, how to learn habits? What are the steps in the habit process? Usually they break it down into 4. There's something that triggers the habit, starts the habit. Say the alarm clock goes off. Time to get up, that's a trigger, that's a cue. Mm-hmm. And then there's a craving that happens as a result of that cue happening. Mm-hmm. In the case of the alarm clock in the morning, it might be wanting to feel alert. So, what do I do? That's the craving. Mm-hmm. Well, so then there's the actual routine you do. Mm-hmm. In other words, you do something in order to satisfy the craving, to desire to feel alert. Mm-hmm. You do coffee. And then that coffee then becomes the habit, making of the coffee, drinking of the coffee. And then there's the last part of the habit process, the reward. Mm-hmm. In other words, the payoff. Mm-hmm. The payoff is you feel more alert. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's basically the standard way that a habit breaks down. So there are better ways. There are ways of establishing the habit, making it more easy. So if you have a cue, you want to make it obvious. Mm-hmm. The alarm clock's very obvious. Mm-hmm. Putting fruit on the counter to eat good food is very obvious. Mm-hmm. Then you want to make the craving, you want to make it attractive. In other words, you want the fruit to be something you like to eat, actually. Mm-hmm. Then the response, you want to make it easy. Walking along, picking a grape. Much easier than peeling something.
Like a pineapple or something.
Pineapple.
You got to prepare it.
Cutting the pineapple, yeah. And the reward, you make it satisfying. You enjoy it satisfies your hunger. Mm-hmm. Or in the opposite way, if you have a habit you want to break or modify, then you do quite the opposite. You want to make the cue invisible. Mm-hmm. Take the cookies and get them off the counter. Mm-hmm. And then for the craving, you want to make it unattractive. Mm-hmm. In other words, you want the cookies, but you picture yourself in the swimsuit. Mm-hmm. So you make it unattractive to eat that. Mm-hmm. So then the response, you want to make it very difficult. Mm-hmm. Let's say that you have to keep the cookies around because maybe your spouse or your children demand cookies. You put them in the back of the counter. Mm-hmm. Some people have gone so far as to put a lock on the refrigerator and give the key to their partner. Don't go that far.
Right,
and finally, you make the reward unsatisfying. I did this when I was trying to break my habits of eating donuts in the office. I would remember that I would fall asleep about 10 o'clock if I ate the donuts at 8. Mm-hmm. So it was unsatisfying. So that's what you do with it.
And so just a note about that too. If a cue doesn't work, You change it up. One time I wanted to wear this dress, so I hung it on a cabinet by the refrigerator, and it just, in no time at all, I didn't even see it. So that didn't work. So I had to think of something else, a different cue.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So you may need to change some things up. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
But over time, see, your brain then forms that into a channel and it becomes a habit.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the way you build
That's
things.
your objective.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So
Right.
there's tendencies. This wonderful book that was written about the 4 tendencies by Gretchen Rubin, and we just threw it in because it helps to understand who you are when you're trying to build habits. And so she breaks habit people up into 4 categories. She laughs and she's breaking people up into 4 categories. But first of all, there's most people are either questioners or obligers. The questioners, they can do habits. That's not a problem. It's just a matter of getting all of their questions answered. I can do this, and that's most people are like that. Then there's the obligers, and so whereas the questioners need their questions answered, the obliger needs accountability because they will do anything that is asked of them. They're on 5 church committees. They will do anything for anyone but themselves. And so they need accountability, someone to help them do something for themselves. There's 2 rare tendencies, she calls them. One is the upholder, and the upholder is like,
just do it.
Just do it. They're
Yeah.
the Nike people, and they're really irritating people, aren't we? Anyway, and then there are the rebels, and the rebels, their motto is, "You can't make me do it, and I can't either." And so with the rebels, then what they need is a good picture of the consequences. Child, if you don't eat that piece of broccoli, no ice cream. Okay.
And so the important thing is to know which category you're in.
Yeah.
A lot of women are obligers.
Yeah,
they're nurturers. They love to do things for other people,
Absolutely.
but for themselves. So if you know which tendency you fall into, then you get help. If you're an obliger, go to an accountability group, do Weight Watchers, do whatever it takes. And another thing is, you might have different areas of your life where you have different. You're different. Some areas of my life, I am an upholder. Some areas, I'm not. So
Which are those?
Okay.
All right. The next part is something I'm real fond of. It's about what makes you change, and it talks about. Well, when a habit becomes a habit, it leaves the conscious mind. You don't have to think about it that much into the unconscious mind. You're doing it automatically. And so a lot of the things that you do are automatic in your unconscious. A lot of your reactions are. We won't get much into reactions and trauma, but a trauma reaction is something that comes from the unconscious, and it's seemingly out of your control. And so, but a lot of habits feel that way too. You have these cravings that come from the unconscious, and you feel compelled to do things. And that's because this particular author is pretty good, Dan Heath. He writes about us being a rider on top of an elephant and going along a path. And so the riders are conscious mind. We know where we want to go. We know what we want to do. We want to do that New Year's resolution. We want to go to the gym. We want to eat right. We know what we should do. Quit smoking. We know all about that. Well, we're riding on an elephant, and that's a massive unconscious that wants what it wants now. And it's got all the habits and all the different things involved that seemingly, and it controls a lot of your life, really. And then there's the path that the rider can see where it's going, but the elephant doesn't care. It just wants to go where it wants to go. The rider wants to go over there. So you can consciously grab the reins January 1st and go to the gym. And you can grab the reins January 2nd and go to the gym. Eventually, like any rider and an elephant, he gets tired. He can't control. It's too big. And so what we find is that gradually over time, the elephant, that unconscious mind, has to be trained to go where the rider wants to go. And that's why it takes time to change habits. That's why it takes time to fight the motivations that you might have. But you can, because that's how they got there in the first place.
Right.
Over time.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just a matter
You started doing it over time.
You're just doing it over
Right.
time.
Excellent
And you have
point.
to motivate over time, and you can change it.
Right. But it's not going to be motivation or goals alone.
No. Well, the motivation goals come from the rider. The elephant only wants what it wants. It doesn't care about motivations and goals. It just wants what it wants.
Right.
Now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Every team has a goal of winning.
Right.
Not all of them win. You know, so it's not just goals, folks.
No, it's not just goals.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is the next page. This is page 16 in the book. It's called Stages of the Change Model. It helps to understand where you are in the process of change. And so when there's the pre-contemplation. It's like, maybe I ought to do that. The second is the contemplation, like, well, if I did that, then I suppose I could do that. It's kind of like a planning stage. Then there's a preparation where you're determined. You say, okay, I'm going to do this and this and this, and you commit to doing it. Then there's taking action, of course. Now you're actively involved in the change. Then once you got it going, then there's maintenance, because one thing we want to say is that change is not like this. It's not like an airplane taking off. It's more like the stock market. Up and down, up and down. So the maintenance part is like up and down, gotta go, up, down, gotta go, up and down, gotta But it's the trend line that's important. And finally, the change termination, you're done. It's now a habit.
It's in the unconscious.
It's in the unconscious.
Yeah.
You're
I
now
really
allowed-
like the roundabout.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, you talk about it. You're the author of that.
Well, okay. The next page in 17 is called the change roundabout.
Right.
Now, in Europe, everything's a roundabout. I mean, I had to learn that when I was driving in Europe, on the wrong side of the car, and from the wrong side of the road, and learn about roundabouts, because it's like, wow. Well, now they're putting them into the United States. A lot of the different places have roundabouts. I think there's one city in Indiana where it's got everything's a roundabout.
Yeah, Carmel.
Carmel.
Yeah.
Which they
I
should
forget.
pronounce.
There's like 150 or some unbelievable number in that one city.
I know.
It's great.
But what a roundabout, usually we think of change sequentially. And then this. Well, a roundabout is something you can leave and enter at any point. And that's the way change is. And so, in a sense, you're going along and whoop, you exit the change. Well, you think, but you can get back in.
Right.
And you can keep going around.
Right.
Yeah.
I just love that because it just removes the condemnation that you feel
I
like
failed.
I'll never be able to do this.
I failed, yeah.
But you just get right back on.
Yeah.
I love that. That is excellent.
Okay, the keystone habit. And I don't know if do you think I have time to tell the story? I
don't think so, but it's a great story.
Okay, but anyway, a keystone, it comes from the Roman arch, is that you've got the two sides of an arch. Well, they're actually held up by this one stone in the center. If you watch the St. Louis arch being built in St. Louis, Missouri, if there's one piece, the last piece had to fit exactly right to hold up the sides. That's the keystone from ancient times. And habits are like that. There's a certain thing, if you can do that, then it triggers everything else. There was I won't go into the story, but there's an example of a woman who for motivation for doing something, she had to quit smoking. Well, had she quit smoking, therefore she changed her eating habits, and then she went back to school, and then she quit, on and on. It changed her entire life just doing one thing.
Yeah.
So you may have a keystone habit, something that if you did fix that, if you change that, might change everything.
Right. And you sometimes find those keystone habits in hindsight.
Yeah.
You're like,
oh,
that's
yeah.
what did it.
That's what did it.
That's what did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, in fact, I would honestly say that for you, that habit of praying for people every day was a keystone habit.
Might have been.
Because it really changed a lot.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, the next thing is fighting entropy. And this is the concept, it's on page 18. And in fact, things decay. And it's from scientifically, it's from the second law of thermodynamics. If things lose energy, become more disordered over time. Everything does. Our bodies, where we live, our jobs, everything is result of that. So honestly, knowing habits really helps because it helps you to maintain everything. If you habitually, do the lawn work, it'll keep. If you let the lawn go, entropy happens. It falls apart.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at a balloon. I think that a balloon over time, if you keep it, it will just kind of disintegrate.
Yeah.
Disintegrate.
Just lose energy.
Yeah.
But it happens to our bodies and our spirits and everything.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why habits are so important, because they put new energy into what we're doing. They put new life. They continue growth. Yeah.
And we need to do that. Okay. Tiny habits.
Yeah.
I love this.
I know. And actually,
it takes the pressure off it.
This is one of the most important parts. Right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. And so sometimes, like the classic New Year's resolution, you get in there, you're gung ho. I'm going to do this every day for the rest of my life.
Probably not.
Yeah, and it doesn't happen. I think there's 3 weeks is the...
It's about the average.
Yeah.
They said quit day is January 11th this year.
Yeah, because there's a quit day. You just don't do it. Okay, so there's another way to do these. It's called tiny habits. And so first, you find a behavior that you want to do. For example, having a quiet time in the morning. Okay, so you decide this is what I want to do. And so you make it tiny. You reduce it. So you're not thinking about, for example, going to the gym and doing it all. For example, in the gym, you just walk in. And
you just go.
You just go and you walk around. And so, with you wanted to start a morning Bible time, you start with finding a place that is going to be that, I call it an expectancy spot. It's one spot because it's important for a daily routine to have that one spot. So you go and you set it up. You put in pencils, a notebook, or place, put things in place. I always have a little pad or something, because I'll think, I got to do this today, and rather than running off and doing it, I've got it written down. So I'm not going to be distracted by that. Okay, so you set an alarm. You make it fit into your life. You set an alarm 5 minutes early at first. And so what this will do, it will set your day in motion. Some people say, well, I do better at night. And you might, but for me and this house, I do better in the morning.
Who else said that? Wasn't it say, David, I will raise my voice to you in the morning. I will praise you each morning.
Yes, David. This was David.
Well, didn't he say
yes,
that?
Yes. And you confess your sins. You get your day in motion. And so then you're going to nurture its growth. You're going to congratulate yourself on the small wins. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So in the habit section, what you eventually do, you've got your cue, you've got your alarm. You end up craving this time because this is the place where God speaks to you. And, it's just this awesome time. And so, eventually, I don't even set an alarm, but that's happened over 40 years of doing this. And so, but go ahead, set that alarm until this thing is fully in place and maybe forever. That's fine. That's fine. But, so it's a great way to start. Just start with tiny habits. Just, go to the gym and just, walk around. The next day, bring a bag with you and find a locker and put it in the locker and walk around.
There's an important point there too about cravings. And we're talking about bad habits. You have a craving. You have craving to do good habits too. Eventually you crave good habits. That's the point you just brought up.
Yeah.
And the truth is, it's as hard to break a good habit as it is to break a bad habit. Because if you didn't go and do that in the morning, you'd feel like the day wasn't quite right.
Yes.
And you'd feel like something was missing.
Right.
Because you want to do that. You have a motivation inwardly to do that.
That's so true. Yeah. That's true.
So anyway, this next page illustrates that emotions make the habit development flow. It's by a book by B.J. Fogg called Tiny Habits. One of my favorites. And so he has 3 different sections that are pretty easy to remember. After I do this, I will do that, and then I will celebrate. And I have to tell the story about BJ real fast.
Yeah.
That got him involved in this thing. It's really fascinating. He was a professor of psychology at Stanford, and he also was a surfer. And so he wanted to build up his upper body, and it would help him with his surfing. So he said to his fellow Stanford psychologist friend, he said, tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do 20 push-ups. And I'm going to do that every day. Boom. January 1st, 20 push-ups. January 2nd, I'm going to do it. So he woke up January 1st, and he did 20 push-ups. It was hard. I said, okay. Woke up January 2nd. Oh, sore arms, but he did 20 push-ups. January 3rd, he said, I just can't do this. So his professor friend said, hey, BJ, how does your 20 push-up habit going? And BJ said, it's just too hard. BJ, you're a Stanford professor. You ought to be able to figure this out. And he went, shame. Okay, so I'll figure it out. So he said, well, 20's too much. Maybe I can just start with 2 against the wall. So I did that and did 2 against the wall. But then he added something really important. He celebrated. Yes! And he did 4 the next day and 6. And his friend asked him, so BJ, how's it going now? He said, oh, it's great. I did 6 against the wall and I celebrated. And his friend said, BJ, my grandmother can do that. There's nothing to celebrate. Said, oh, but let me point out why. Because I, being a Stanford professor, understood that my unconscious mind, my elephant, doesn't know the difference between 6 against the wall and 20 on the ground. It thinks maybe I did 100 because I celebrated. And I felt so good. It gave me such a feeling of glow that I wanted to do it again to get that feeling. Dopamine, remember that? And so that's what happened. Eventually he did 20 without a problem. But he celebrated. Once he did 20 and it was a habit, he didn't have to celebrate anymore because it was already a habit then. He just woke up and did it. And that's what happens. That's so important as you build up all of these habits to start with that, what you can do easily, and then celebrate.
Right.
And then build up.
Right.
And celebrate.
And celebrate. And when you're having that quiet time in the morning, at the end you just praise God that you were able to do this and you were able to spend this time with Him. It's awesome.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, which you begin to crave.
You begin to crave that.
Yeah.
So that this is a worksheet on page 23, as we've talked about in other books. Doing the worksheet is very important because that's what actually makes you grow.
Right.
So the worksheet on page 23 says to do that. Just pick out something real small. After I do this, then after I wake up, I'll do whatever, and then I'll celebrate. How do you celebrate? Any way you want.
Right. And you don't have to tell people that's what you're doing.
No, you don't.
It's okay.
Yeah,
just
whatever.
say if you're, of course, celebrating the Lord you always want to do.
You always want to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, that's
Okay.
section 1. Thank you very much.
Okay, glad you were here. We're going to move on.